Hello, this is One on One with the new head of Metro Nashville Public Schools, Dr. Shawn Joseph. He was hired last spring by the Metro School Board after a pretty rocky search process that left the position of Director of Schools unfilled for more than a year. Dr. Joseph is now 90 days into the job as head of schools, and there's much to discuss about his goals, concerns, and more. Welcome to One on One, Dr.
Thank
Joseph.
you. It's great to be here.
90 days is not much time, but it seems like you have done a lot in 90 days. Are you where you thought you'd be or wanted to be 90 days into this job?
Yeah, we are. We are where we want to be. And forgive me for my voice. I'm nursing a cold here. But over the past 90 days, I mean, as of today, we've visited about 70 schools out of our 150 schools that we have within the district. We've had an opportunity to rebrand, think about how we could better communicate with our constituency. How do we provide better supports for our staffs? And I think the biggest thing we've done is just listen, to really try to understand what it is, the state of Metro Nashville Public Schools, so we can begin to put together a strategic plan that really moves us forward in the years to come.
And you started off with these listening sessions, which is, I think, what you called them, listening sessions.
Listen and learn sessions, yes.
Okay, with parents and teachers.
Yes.
It was open to anyone?
Yes, we engaged over 3,000 families and staff members over that course of that time, and it really.
And what time period was this?
This was all in July.
Okay.
So we had 14 meetings in July. I think we had one that went into August, but we were committed to making sure we got around to all the high schools before the school year opened, and we were able to do that.
And what came out of that? Was there maybe one or two things that really surprised you?
Well, one of the things that came out was I realized how much people care about education here in the Metro Nashville Public Schools, which was, it's an amazing acknowledgement that people care and they want this district to move forward. We had a range of information that was learned through those sessions, and we're using that information to go into our transition report that'll be coming out in about January or February to really lay out, again, where are we as a district and where do we want to go. But I heard a range of things from, what can we do to improve special education services? How do we ensure that gifted programs are strong in all of our schools? What do we do to support middle schools? What are we planning on doing to move our literacy rates within the district? I mean, it was the range of topics. I mean, we just opened it up and said, ask any question you want, and we'll take it on.
Okay, well, I want to talk to you some more about the strategic plan in a bit, but first let's talk about who you are. Where did you come from? What is your background in education as far as your careers, your prior careers? Tell us a little bit about Dr. Shawn Joseph.
Sure, so I grew up in New York. I went to Lincoln University as an undergrad, and I was going to major in biology at Lincoln. My junior year, make a very long story short, I met a student who couldn't read, and I ended up changing my major from biology to English education. I just couldn't understand how in America do we allow children to get through our schools and not give them the ability to read. I mean, it's a civil right. So I graduated from Lincoln University with a degree in English education, and over the past 20 years, I mean, I've been an English teacher, a reading specialist, a dean of students, an assistant principal, a director of schools. I was a superintendent in a small rural district, and then a deputy superintendent in a large urban district, and now I'm blessed to have the opportunity to be here.
Sounds like you've worn almost every hat there is in education.
Right. I mean, and I think that helps me. It helps me from, making stupid comments, because I get it. I think I get it from the classroom on up through the superintendency that, we've got to work together and make sure we are a true team to help execute, to make sure our kids get what they deserve.
Well, when you came here, Nashville Schools had been involved in a pretty drawn-out search process, and it had been a little rocky. It had been off again, on again. There had been offers made and rescinded or rejected. What was your thinking about coming into a process like that? Was it intimidating, or did you see that as a challenge that you welcomed?
I mean, I welcomed the challenge. What I appreciated about the process that I participated in was that it seemed like the entire community was engaged in it. And that was one of the reasons that I was interested in applying for the position because you had the business community, you had the mayor's office, you had the Board of Education. It seemed like you had the whole city really rallying around getting this right. And I really appreciated the transparency of the process. And I just jumped in and tried to show Nashville who I was, and it just kind of worked out.
Okay. And you knew there had been some struggles between the previous director of schools and the school board.
Sure. I mean, I spent the year, reading, reading news articles and, well, a year's worth of reading newspaper articles and looking at board meetings and things. So I saw some of the areas where people disagreed and where they kind of rallied. So I walked in with my eyes wide open.
But what area stood out to you the most as an area of disagreement?
Yeah, I think the issue of should we have charter schools or not was something that clearly there was a divide amongst the community, and so. But beyond that, I mean, if you took that issue and you put it aside, I think you had 9 board members that really were passionate about moving the district forward and were really passionate about getting things right. So, if it's just one issue, I think that was a pretty good, good scenario to be in.
Well, you also specifically took on the goal of trying to improve communications. And if I'm not mistaken, that was a part of your agreement in coming in, is how communications between the central office and the board would be handled.
Yes.
And it was different than it had been in the past.
Yes.
Tell us what you wanted to do there and how that's going.
Well, the board and I have had a great relationship over these past 90 days. I mean, we have had, I believe, four retreats where we've talked about communications. We've talked about, how do we work together to move this district forward. And, over those conversations, one of the things we talked about was, how do we really make sure parents and staff got their needs addressed. What are the proper kind of procedures to follow to do that? And what's my role in resolving those issues and communicating with the board? So we kind of clarified and hashed out all those details so we could execute, because it could get, in a district with 86,000 kids and over 10,000 employees, you could be chasing rabbits, just running around if you don't have structures and processes for getting things done. So the board's been, they have been tremendous and extremely supportive in these first 90 days and really working to get it right. I mean, we've got a new logo now, B cubed, Build a Better Board. And in that, we're talking about, we are going to be a team, the administration and the board, to really, like I said, move this district forward. So it's been good so far.
Well, the board certainly embraced your hiring unanimously, and everybody welcomed you, and they offered you a contract that included some of these things we've talked about.
Sure.
But they offered you some other things as incentives, and I want to talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
Because some of that has been fodder for social media, and there's been
Yes.
some discussion about some of the incentives, let's
Right.
say. Some people call them perks.
Right.
But the incentives
Sure.
that you received, like a Tahoe and housing stipends and things like that. I think your salary is comparable to what had been offered to others. But how did you feel about getting those incentives, and what has been your thought process about how best to utilize them?
Yeah, sure. I think my contract, if you look at the top 50 large school districts in America, you'll see that my contract is probably very similar to what you would see around the country. I mean, most districts give a superintendent a car, or they give them a car allowance, either or. Most districts pay for transitional housing as you come, because again, when I started on July 1, we had 31 principal vacancies to fill. I was appointed on May 13th. But I didn't start until July 1. But I spent the month of June kind of working for free, just kind of flying back and forth. The board did give me 10 transition days, but I worked every day, I would say, from the time I was appointed, just flying back and forth to make sure we were set for school. So I don't think the compensation or perks were unreasonable or out of the ordinary, but it may be different from whether, if you hire somebody from within the state, maybe you don't need, housing expense to transition in, or a car. I mean, the car in itself, I mean, we have a fleet, and it wasn't a car that I asked for, per se. It was the car that was assigned to me when I came into the district, and I just accepted what was assigned to me.
And well, it does seem like these are things that weren't necessarily typical here before.
Right,
And
well,
so and I understand what you're saying about in other districts. So do you understand where maybe some of the pushback has come from?
Sure. Well, but I would say, I mean, that's where I was a little, I was still trying to understand. I mean, all superintendents have had cars. That's not new to the district. All superintendents have had people driving them. Maybe not the person that I have assigned driving, but there's typically been a staff member to get people around. I mean, I have made it a point to be in schools. I mean, like I said, I've visited 70 schools thus far, and I've been, fully immersed in the community. And when you look at the time that you spend on the road, I mean, I really need to multitask while I'm in the car. So, I'm on emails and I'm taking phone calls. Constantly emails, phone calls, or I'm preparing because I'm in and out of meetings, having to give speeches or things of that nature. So
So you feel you're utilizing these resources and tools to help you do the job more effectively and more intensely.
Exactly.
What about the hiring that you have done? That has also led to some concern, and maybe in tandem with what we just talked about, the hiring at the central office at salaries much higher than has been typical in the past. Explain why you're taking that approach.
Yeah, so, I think Nashville did a great job laying out the landscape that we have, and there was a document called Reset that really talked about the fact that we need to pay our employees much better. And if we're going to recruit and retain the best, I mean, you've got to pay them a competitive salary. So again, when you look at the national, the Council of Great City Schools, and you look at the average salary of the positions, I just aligned our salaries to those national averages. So it's not, and now it's more than what had typically been paid in Nashville, because Nashville was woefully, underpaying in key areas. And it's, salary compensation for all employees is something, that I really want to address. I mean, I want our teachers to be the highest paid teachers in the state. I mean, I want our secretaries to be the highest paid, and I want them to earn, that money through great works. And so as we raise salaries, we'll raise the accountability as we go forth. But, the salaries that I have are in line, again, with what it looks like nationally, and we have some extraordinary people. And I think if people were to, just ask somebody in a school, do you feel a difference in terms of support? And, they would emphatically say yes. I mean, we have been out and about really pushing, trying to understand and trying to get ourselves in position to improve educational outcomes for our kids.
Is it possible that maybe it just happens too fast? And do you think maybe you could have overreached because in the case of some of those contracts with your central office staff, they have now been, some clauses have been rewritten because they were reviewed by the board, and the clauses around the sick policy and things like that.
But those, so those are some things that no one that I brought in brought leave. I mean, that was just false. So when I think I saw that on television, and said,
I think the potential being there was the issue.
Yeah, none of them did it or were going to do it. So when you see somebody on TV talking about the taxpayers' money is being taken, it's just false.
Do you think that you did a good job of explaining to the board and to the other folks on staff why you were making these decisions? Could that be part of it?
Yeah, you could always do a better job. I could always do a better job of communicating. And as I look at, how people have reacted, I mean, it's clear that communication could be improved. But at the end of the day, we have some extraordinary people in positions doing great work for kids. And one of the things the board charged me with was moving with a sense of urgency to get us where we needed to be. Again, within a month, I mean, you had to hire 31 new principals. You had a central office that had lots of vacancies that needed to be filled. You had to get school started on August 3rd. Coming from outside, you're engaging 3,000 families, working with the politicians, working with the business leaders, working with teachers. I mean, we were running like most people have never seen, someone run, because again, our goal is to get it right for our kids. And at the end of the day, I know you'll be judged for what you choose to do, but the question becomes, are you going to get the results? And I think right now it's early, it's 90 days. I think over time, I think people will look back on this time and say those were investments that were well worth it when we get the results that we should get for kids.
You mentioned being judged over time. Do you feel like you're being judged fairly? So much of what you're describing is what you were tasked to do, as you said, and what is being done typically in many other districts in the country. Why do you think there's been some negative reaction to that?
Well, I guess, the culture is different from what I'm accustomed to. And I think,
What do you mean by that?
Well,
the culture.
Culture, yeah. So that's I'm from the north, right? And I've come to a more southern environment. And maybe in hindsight, I could have spent more time understanding the cultural norm here of how people done business. I mean, I'm just a fast mover, always been, always will be, because I just work with a sense of urgency to get things right. And sometimes when you move quickly and you're changing things, people have a reaction to it. And that reaction is normal. That reaction is understandable. But at the end of the day, again, I'm charged with making things better for our kids. And that's what I have been committed to doing. So, I don't know if I'm being judged too harshly or not. I think, I've got to communicate better on the whys and the hows, but most people, most of the feedback that I'm getting from people, they understand that it makes sense to have a driver if you're going to get out to 70 schools and you're going to get out into the community, and you do run an organization with a $700 million budget and 10,000 employees, and there are lots of things going on, and to be on top of that, you can't, if you're going to be committed to getting across 500 square miles of city, there should be some provisions. And I think if you look around at, other agencies, it's not out of character or not unreasonable. But I don't, at the end of the day, you're judged, and I accept that judgment. I don't, I don't try to make any assumptions on why I'm being judged that way. Just my goal is
sleep well at night.
To do right. I do. Okay. I really do.
Well, you mentioned communications, and of course, being in the communications business, I know we can all use improvement in that area. But let's talk a little bit about what you're going to be communicating related to the strategic plan that you're developing. Where do you anticipate this going? When will you have some clarity that you can present to the community about your goals for the district?
Well, ideally, the strategic plan will be completed in the March, April time frame. Right now, I have a transition team that has been looking at 4 key areas within the district. What do we do to improve student achievement? What do we do about school choice in the district? How do we better communicate internally and externally? And what do we do to recruit and retain the best talent in America to be in our school district? And
what is that transition team doing? Are they interviewing people? Are they visiting? What are they doing?
All of the above. They've interviewed people, they've surveyed people, they've looked at internal data, resources, documents. They have those 50 individuals that came from, Nashville, the state, and the nation have just really rolled their sleeves up to understand what is the current state of Metro Nashville Public Schools in those 4 areas, and how do we move forward. So they're going to be submitting recommendations to me. We'll get that report in about January, and when that report comes, it'll lay out kind of here's short-term and long-term goals based upon what we see as areas of strength and areas of opportunity. From those recommendations, those initial recommendations will form the basis of where we're going with the strategic plan.
And is there a timeline for that plan? Is it a 2-year plan, a 5-year plan, anything like that?
Typically, a strategic plan is 3 to 5 years. We'll work with the board to figure out whether they want a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan. Every year the plan gets adjusted, so.
Okay.
But it'll be a multi-year plan.
So one of those areas that you're looking at, you said, is charter schools and school choice. And we here at NPT have done quite a bit of work on school choice as part of our American Graduate Project. And certainly there's been a lot of discussion and debate in this community around that, because we do at this time have a lot of choice and options in the district, intentionally so. So I know you are aware of that. What are your thoughts about where choice is now in the district and generally the direction it needs to go? Would you see it being maintained, decreased, what?
Yeah, so right now the conversation about choice has been solely focused on charters, in my opinion, and I think the conversation needs to be much broader than that. I think we need to ask ourselves, what types of options do we want our children to have within Metro Nashville Public Schools in terms of programming? And then we need to ask, is that something we could create and do, or do we find someone to help us do it? But we want best-in-class programs in all neighborhoods.
Do you find that what I observe that sometimes the debate over charter schools kind of overwhelms the discussion about choice? So there is a lot of discussion about choice, but there's a lot of sensitivities, let's put it that way, around charters. So are you finding a way to reconcile that and keep the conversation where it needs to be?
Well, I've visited some charter schools within the district, and I've seen some, good works happening there. I've visited a number of public schools. I think my approach has been.
But you said just what a lot of people say: charter schools are public schools, and that's where that debate and confusion has come in. So I wonder if you're going to be addressing that, because the charter schools that are up for discussion in Metro schools are public schools, and then there are the other optional schools that are public schools as well.
So like I was saying, our charters. My approach has been. I've been very inclusive of our charters. They can participate in all school district meetings and so forth, and we've had a strong communication relationship with them. We want to know if they're doing something good and that can be replicated in other schools. We'd want to know, and there are great things happening in our public schools that we can help support them with. Our goal is to have great schools in Nashville. We want all of our kids to have great options, and so that's how we've approached it, as we want to have any school in Nashville, we want to make sure they have strong programming and great experiences. And any way we can help, we'll do that. And if they're, like I said, if they're doing something that's excellent, we want to see and know about it so we can, ideally replicate it.
And are you also looking at this from a perspective of neighborhood schools as well as choice schools where students can go outside of their neighborhoods, which has been one of the areas of contention here?
What's that now?
Neighborhood schools, those zoned schools, as they may be called in some places, versus kids or families who choose to send their children to a charter school or another school that's desired, as opposed to neighborhood schools. And there are many that feel that neighborhood schools have been hurt by that.
Well, we want all of our neighborhood schools to be desired. That's something we know we want to work on. If there's not a desire, we want to understand why not, and make sure that that desire is there. My primary goal is to make our neighborhood schools strong. We shouldn't feel like you need to go to a magnet school to get a strong education. You should be able to get that in your neighborhood. And that's our thinking on it. And as we roll out a strategic plan and as we roll out our budgeting priorities, it'll be heavily supporting neighborhood schools and strong programs in all schools.
You are a parent. You told me you have 2 children. So at some point, your children will be attending schools
Absolutely.
Here. So a lot of the decisions you're making will impact your children, which
Absolutely.
Middle school age. What are the ages again?
I have a high schooler and a middle schooler.
Okay. So is there something you want to say about what you're doing for those who say it's moving too fast, there's too much urgency, whatever, in the context of also being a parent of students who will be in this district?
Well, I think every parent wants a high quality education for their children. And, I'm working with the sense of urgency of a parent. And, you know, I'm going to put my kids in the whatever neighborhood we live in, they'll go to that local public school. You know, my children are, they're able, but but they should be able to get their needs met in their public school. And, you know, we're taking a year to, you know, find the neighborhood we want to live in. And when we find that neighborhood, they'll go to the local public school. And, you know, I should feel, rest assured, I should feel confident that my kids will get what they need in their local neighborhood school.
Okay.
And so that's how put my money where my mouth is on that. And, you know, and what we need are, you know, demand parents in our school district. And then that's what every school district needs. I mean, we need parents that will commit to the public schools and provide their resource and support to make our public schools great. I think a big part of many urban school districts' challenge is that we have parents who check out for whatever reason. They don't commit to their community schools, and as a result, there's a negative effect. Look, we have about 18% poverty in Nashville, but then when you look at our public schools, it's more like 60 or 70%. You know, what that tells me is that we have a lot of families with means who have, for whatever reason, not stayed committed to their neighborhood public schools. And I think that's something we need to change. I mean, if we're going to fix the schools, they need to be real community schools where people see and feel the value in those schools. And you know, we've got to do a good job of communicating the great things that are happening in our schools and getting our families in to see, you know, you don't have to spend money for a private school, and you don't have to send your kid way across town to a special school to get their needs met.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll be checking back in with you in a few weeks about that strategic plan, Dr. Shawn Joseph. And that has been One on One. Thank you for joining us, and you have a good day.